Hey everybody, welcome back to the 7th edition of the Shot Free from the Tee podcast. I am your host, Jason Rosslet, as I will be joined later on in segment 2 by Matt Jones, who I guess I can call my co-host for that segment now, as he's been on almost every single episode. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed that segment and what we've brought to it. The name of the podcast is Shot Free from the Tee. Let me tell you, I really need this shot free from the tee this week after my debacle with guessing the salaries. I'm going to give myself a total F for the week, as I totally glanced over. First off, before I even get into the salaries, I totally glanced over Hovland being in the field when I was recording it last night. My apologies. Even if I did see Hovland in the field, though, I would have slid him in at third. So I would have had Finau at 11.4, Kuchar at 11.1, Hovland 10.8, Day 10.4, Horschel 10.1. Well, I wasn't even really close, to be honest with you. Kuchar at 11.4 is leading the salary board this week for DraftKings. Obviously, our first segment where I review my salaries from last night. Sorry, I didn't really lead into that there, but that's okay. I hope you guys will give me the benefit of the doubt. Now let's talk about Kuchar for a second at 11.4. The guy hasn't had a top 20 since, the Charles Schwab, all the way back in over the summer. So it's been quite some time, almost 5 months now. I cannot understand why he's 11.4 this week. I've seen a few people already kind of question it as well, so I wouldn't be surprised to see his ownership extremely low. I know it's super early in the week to be talking about that, but thought I'd bring that up. Second, Hovland at 11.2. Makes sense. I got to be honest, though. I'm a little surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be, about how high the books are rating Hovland. I mean, they've got him ranked better than, Tony Finau, who's 14th or 15th or 16th in the world. So just an interesting thing to take a note there. Jason Day at 11K. Makes sense. Decent start. Kind of a tough field this week. I'm sorry, not tough field. A rather weak field. Tony Finau at 10.6. And Billy Horschel at 10.2. So actually, Horschel I was the closest on. I guess 10.1. He comes in at 10.2. And I got him in the right place. So he was the only one that I had that I got right there. So luckily for me, I'm not really getting graded except for by myself. And luckily this doesn't mean too much. It's just total guessing. And just trying really to get you set up for the week and who you can expect to see when the salaries are released. So hopefully you have fun with it. I try and have a little fun with it as well. All right, let's go learn about the field. And last night I went over the qualifications, and it's a relatively normal PGA event. 132 golfers are competing in it this week, made up of sponsor exemptions, Monday qualifiers, and the normal qualification process. All those weird ones for the PGA, like the winner of the players and so on and so forth. I talked about that last night. So here, I'm going to go over the sponsors exemptions, and I'm going to go over the Monday qualifiers. That's what I normally do. I'm also going to go over any field changes that have happened. So players that we want to take a note at. So let's go over sponsors exemption first. First two are from the Korn Ferry Tour Finals. So guys that obviously qualified for their PGA Tour card via this, but might have gotten just didn't quite get in the field based off of their rankings from that. So needed a sponsor exemption, but they're unrestricted. So Rafael Campos, made all four, looks like made his last 4 cuts, but only top 20 was 2 weeks ago in Bermuda. Maverick McNeely, the other one, the young prospect, has made 4 of 6 cuts with just 1 top 20 at the Houston Open 2 starts ago. Harris English, who's had an impeccable fall circuit, having 3 top 10s after having to go back to the Korn Ferry Tour Finals to get his status back. Once they reshuffle, they do a reshuffle of qualifications. He'll be very much towards the top. Sean Stefani, very similar to Harris English, above out of the category he's playing with. However, the finishes haven't been as good, though came in 11th 2 weeks ago at the Bermuda Championship, so not bad at all. Here's one that I don't suspect many people will know, and I had to do a little research myself. William Gordon, recently turned pro from Vanderbilt. He was ranked 9th in the amateur ranks before turning pro. He's been playing on the Canadian Tour last couple of years, 2 starts on the PGA Tour last couple of years, 1 start on the Korn Ferry Tour. And in those, that culminated 12 starts. He's made 10 cuts. 6 of those 10s wound up in top 30s as well. So definitely piquing my interest, I'm not going to lie. William Gordon, a little bit more so than Callum Hill, the young Scotland guy who's been tearing it up on the Challenge Tour. And this is a very similar spot to where we saw Audrey Arnaud, or Arnaud, however you want to say it. The young Spaniard that had a great year on the European Tour this year was in a very similar spot, got a sponsor's exemption after tearing up the Challenge Tour during this time, during the fall. Got her sponsor's exemption into this field, ended up missing the cut. Not saying that's going to happen here to Callum Hill, who has been playing very, very well. 2 wins and 3 third-place finishes in his last 11 starts, so very impressive. This is quite a bit a step up in competition this week, however. Jose de Jesus Rodriguez is our next sponsor's exemption. He was unable to retain his PGA Tour card through the Corn Ferry Tour Finals after finishing outside of the top 125. He's a Mexican product that obviously is not going to get that many starts on the PGA Tour, so we'll need a good start. We'll need to string together a couple of good starts to get himself some status and hopefully either get himself back on the Corn Ferry Tour or at least get him enough FedEx Cup points to get him into the Corn Ferry Tour Finals next year. So wish Jose de Jesus all the best this week. Next sponsor's exemption is obviously one that I've talked about a couple of times and I'm very interested in, and that's Brandon Wu, very promising product out of Stanford. Not only did he make the cut at the Houston Open after getting the sponsor's exemption, I believe, either that or he Monday qualified. I think it was the sponsor exemption. Came in 17th, so really good, promising start there. Then he goes to Corn Ferry Tour Finals Stage 2, ends up being the medalist or co-medalist there after 4 rounds. So obviously Brendan Wu feeling good about his game, has status on the Corn Ferry Tour regardless of what happens in his next 4 or 5 starts through sponsor's exemption on the PGA Tour in search of that special temporary membership. So see if Brandon Wu can get himself into the top 10 this week and earn himself another start. Finishing it off here, Roberto Diaz, similar to Jose de Jesus, just couldn't get his card back through the Corn Ferry Tour Finals, so he tries to find something this week. Next one is a 17th ranked amateur in the world, a sophomore at Wake Forest, Eugenio Lopez Chikara, I believe. I did okay there. I don't think I did great, but I do think I did okay. We'll see if he gets on coverage at all. Like I said, 17th ranked amateur in the world, is a sophomore, young kid. Next one is Alvaro Ortiz, the brother of Carlos. Recently turned pro, but hasn't made a cut professionally since the Masters. And then last but not least is Sebastian Vasquez, only his 7th start as a professional here, with his best finish being a T9 at the Mexican Open on the Latino America Tour last year. So that rounds out our sponsors exemption this week. I counted, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Looks like 12, somewhere in that range, which seems kind of high, but it is a Open Championship during the fall circuit, so maybe a couple more sponsors exemptions to go around than normal. Okay, field changes, only 2 this week. Anirban Lahiri is not going to compete. Sebastian Kaplan gets in the field because of that, and John Huh, who's a previous winner of the event, had to drop out, and Tom Hoagie gets in for him. So now we move on to our Monday qualifiers to close out our field discussion of the Mayakoba Golf Classic. Tyler Macomber, who sits just outside of that reshuffle as guys that earned their card through the Corn Ferry Tour Finals. He's made 4 cuts in 5 events this fall. Not bad. Nothing great, though, in terms of finishing, but gets to the weekend. He Monday qualified. He was the low man, followed by Efren Cerna Jr. Gotta be honest, I've never heard of this guy. You gotta go all the way back to 2010, where he finished 3rd at the Mexico Open Bicentenary. Man, good for Efren. He gets a start here this week. Could be a life-changing event for him, for sure. Next up, then comes Ben Silverman. Probably heard of Ben before. He's been on the PGA Tour a couple of times. Gets in this week. And then Jimmy Stanger, who's a full-time status on the Corn Ferry Tour. Had a decent season, earning him 4 top 10s on that tour, but just not enough to get a PGA Tour promotion, as Jimmy Stanger will look to get a PGA Tour career started the hard way this week as a Monday qualifier. That covers some of the players in this field that you may not know or may not understand how they got into the field. it's a good way to look at some of the young and up-and-coming stars that may get sponsors exemptions or what have you, so I always like to do it. Next segment, we're going to move on to the opening odds and salary discussion, where I give 3 picks, one from under 20 to 1 to win, something from over 40 to 1 to win, and something from over 100 to 1 to win. Just 3 guys that I might be focused on this week. When I first saw the salaries come out, took a look at these 3. Then we're going to move on to our second segment with Matt Jones. Okay, so Viktor Hovland, 18 to 1. I just feel like this course, which requires precision off the tee, that's something that he really does incredibly well. The strength of field with Ricky Fowler bowing out, Viktor Hovland could actually be the class of the field. So I like him to qualify. Well, actually not qualify for the Masters. You don't get that at this course, but still get those 500 FedEx points. Get out of that Korn Ferry Tour reshuffle kind of thing that he's the status that he's in. He'll have full-time status, of course. So I like Viktor Hovland 18 to 1 to win this week. Patty Perez, a former winner of the event and loves the green surfaces, 61 to 1 to win after a good finish a couple of weeks ago before the Houston Open. So Patty Perez, certainly a name to look at. The next one we're going to talk a little bit about in the next segment, so I won't say that much about him now, is Henrik Norlander, 225 to 1 to win. And like I said, we'll cover him in the next segment with Matt Jones, so I won't give away too much. So hopefully you'll come back on the other side of this. I appreciate you coming back for hopefully the 7th time for the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast. I appreciate everybody's feedback. And of course, I appreciate you joining this evening. And we'll see you on the other side with Matt. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the second half of the Shot 3 from the Tee podcast. I'm joined by my co-host for this segment. I'm going to go ahead and just give you that title there, Matt.
Oh, nice. Got a promotion.
Right? I mean, we've been doing it for a couple weeks now, and this segment's been great. I've gotten a lot of great feedback on it. So my co-host for the segment, Matt Jones. Matt, what's going on? How's it going? You enjoying football season, or is it a drag right now? Where do you land?
I think I'm back on the upswing now. It was I hit the doldrums like 2 weeks ago, and I'm back into it. I think the week off of golf last week helped me out a little bit, where I didn't feel like I was spending every second looking at spreadsheets and whatnot.
Yeah, your eyes can definitely go crazy, and I saw that you went to the that conference at Wharton, so that probably invigorated you a little bit, correct?
Oh, for sure. That was unreal. Anybody who's interested in stats and analytics should definitely try to make the trip. It was really interesting. An interesting day for sure. Yeah.
After hearing you talk about it, I'm gonna try and make it up there myself in these one of these coming years at least. So all right, we are heading to Mexico, and it's actually for an off week or a fall circuit. I love the golf course. The tournament, obviously, it's not a great field. We'll break that down in a second. But I love the golf course. The resort is beautiful. The sounds are great. I got kind of a bad experience. Have you ever been to Cozumel before?
No.
All right. So Cozumel is really close to Playa del Carmen, where we're playing this week. And I took a ferry ride when I went into a cruise into Cozumel over to Playa del Carmen, and it was the worst experience of my life. No doubt about it. Me and probably 400 other guests that were on the boat with me, probably, I would say 75% of them ended up getting seasick. So it has a weird taste in my mouth because of that, pun and no pun intended. But the golf course and the resort are beautiful. Have you tuned in the last couple of years to watch it at all and gotten that same sense?
Oh yeah, it's unreal. It's definitely one of the ones that I watch every week, but it's definitely one that I make sure I say, hey honey, look at this. Isn't this golf course beautiful?
Yeah, let's go one day. We wanna go visit it one day because it is that good. So one of an interesting note that I found when looking in this, and I'm not the only one that found this. A couple of other people have put it out on Twitter, that driving accuracy is so much more important than driving distance here. One of the biggest outliers of the entire year that we'll see. Do you try and really employ that strategy every week, or do you have a different take?
No, I definitely think it's important. It's always a balance, right? Of like trying to figure out what you're actually like really super narrowing in on, and for whatever reason, accuracy is like my whenever we have to highly weight it, it always seems like it's my least favorite thing to do.
Yeah, right. I totally get you.
But yeah, no, for sure, it's definitely important. We were having a conversation before you and I about this 80-80 club for 80% of fairways and 80% of greens and regulation. So I crunched some numbers on that, and we can talk about that in a sec too.
Yeah. So what Matt's referring to is I looked up some stats of last year, and Matt Kuchar, just what a great week. Ended up 80% of his greens and 80% of his fairways here last year. Obviously, the route to success that he played years past. Patton Kazir in 2017 really got it done with the putting. But I wanted to say what I asked you earlier in the week. Today is Monday. I still got to remember that, right? I asked you. I said, who else? I know it's tough to predict this stuff, but who else could possibly we see hit that 80-80 club this week, where now we really don't have to get that hot of a putter to find himself in the top 10 or top 5 even?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I, as part of the simulator that I run, it calculates, greens and regulation and fairways and proximity and all that good stuff. So basically what I found was it was interesting that Kuchar didn't really pop as particularly likely to do this again, but a couple of guys that seemed somewhat likely, like we're talking about. Victor Hovland was number one in this, and it was like 5% of the time. So it's not particularly likely for many of these guys. But Hovland was up there. Your boy Billy Horschel was up there.
Oh boy.
Emiliano Grillo, which obviously makes a fair bit of sense, and Kevin Streelman were kind of the top like 4 there. Again, like these are super low. Outside of Hovland, none of them have had more than a 2% chance of doing this. So definitely some thin margins here.
Yeah, and I think we can talk about Hovland for just really quick second. The fact of the matter that we've seen him in, call it 10 starts, maybe 15 now. The fact that he's so much significantly higher, I know it may only be 2 or 3 percentage points, but that is statistically significant, I would assume, correct? I mean, this guy is far and away maybe the best ball striker in this field, and by those numbers, maybe one of the best in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty rare. We could maybe say that it's too small of a sample. He probably has 10 events that we can really count for a lot of these stats. But even so, he's played insanely well every time we've seen him. So until he proves otherwise, I think he's a pretty safe bet as far as ball striking goes.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, I got a couple of lesser names that almost hit this club last time they played in Bermuda or at the WGC China. I have both of those here in front of you. So I wanted to just throw a couple names out there. Henrik Norlander threw out 79% of his greens and 75% of his fairways at the Bermuda. Terrible putting. Was 62nd ranked, and I think I took average putts per 18 holes. And it's not, again, we didn't have strokes gained in Bermuda. I mentioned on the top of this the first segment, we didn't have strokes gained for either of them, so can't really judge. But we go by number of putts, and Henrik Norlander was 62nd out of like 70 guys in the field, who's normally a good putter, so maybe something there. Tyler Duncan, who's kind of a stat anomaly guy, hit 81% of his greens and 73% of his fairways. David Hearn and Abraham Answer, along with Brendan Todd, were the only other 3 guys to hit the 70-70 club. Any of those names stick out to you at all?
Yeah, Norlander and Duncan actually were in the, top 15 from the sim that I ran. So that makes a fair bit of sense, I think. And then who was the last one that you just said? Todd and who else?
Yeah, Todd, Abraham Answer, and David Hearn.
Answer was, let's see. Answer didn't do particularly well for 80-80, but 70-70 was he was pretty high up there. He was in like the top. I think he was 18th. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and when we talked a bit about Answer, and even on our Wednesday show that I have with Ben Raza, we talk a lot about Answer and his putting, and with his putter goes his entire game. And he was hot with the putter in China. He ranked in the top 25 in the field in that category and ended up with a top 5. So obviously his form simmering pretty close. Certainly coming from Mexico, this would be an interesting spot for him to get his first PGA Tour victory. No doubt about it. So let's turn our attention to the proximity chart that you put up. And if you haven't seen it, check out on Matt's Twitter at MattJonesTFR. Really good chart, just showing the simulation that we just talked about. It breaks out the average expected shots per 25 yardage range for each golfer in the field. You can find that full chart on his Twitter. It's really great. So when you analyze this briefly, I think you put it up a couple of hours ago. Anything that stuck out to you? I've got a few names, but like to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, and it's funny. The more that I do this, the more that I think it doesn't really matter if I actually load the week's field or not, because if you've noticed, every week I've done this, the charts are almost identical.
Yep.
Whether it's the whole tour or the field, which I think is interesting, but probably a longer conversation for another day. But as far as I think I'm beginning to think about this whole proximity conversation around these predictions a little bit differently. I'm trying to target guys whose strengths are where I'm projecting these attempts to come from. So Griot, we mentioned him already. He is, over the last 50 rounds, he's first in proximity from 150 to 175, and I'm projecting him for 6 attempts from that distance per round. So that's pretty significant. Scott Piercy is up there in 150 to 175 as well. He's 5th over that time frame. And then Vaughn Taylor, as much as it can pain me to say sometimes, he's so 11 of his attempts are supposed to come between 100 and 175 yards. So that's, technically 3 categories, but he's 8th or better in all 3 of the categories that covers. So he's a guy that I'm definitely interested in this week at 6,800.
Yeah, and he had a great 2019 with his irons. One of his best seasons, outside of the win at AT&T against Phil Mickelson a couple of years ago. He did have a really good year. And interesting also to note, the course is a par 71, 7,000 yards, maybe just under it. We'll move into those 2 stats, but before we do, that leads me to say 200 plus this week is basically non-existent, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there are
9, 7 guys. Yeah, 10 guys. Yep.
10 opportunities from 200 plus. So, yeah, not a long iron course for sure. We're not talking about Beth Page Black here. No, not by any stretch. So now, when we talk about short courses, and this is the last stat that I mentioned last night, so we can end on this one. So we like to look at the different strokes gained on specific courses. I think it gives us an indication of which golfers are a good course fit. Sometimes it translates into good course history. Sometimes it doesn't. It's more about course fit, and that's where you should be putting your eggs into your basket, as I've learned over my time. You can't just expect Chad Campbell to keep putting up top 15s at a course that he does every year. So with that being said, any trends stick out to you for the strokes gained par 71 under 7,000 yards? Yeah, I mean it's interesting. The sample size goes down pretty quick. So I really kind of narrowed in on just shorter courses in general for the most part. Yeah,
taking the par out of it in general.
Yeah, yep. And there's probably arguments for and against that either way, but Brian Harmon at 7,700 has really just smashed shorter courses in general. He averages 2.7 strokes gained tee to green on short courses, and he's basically neutral on longer courses. And the simulator actually has him with the most top 5s this week. So I thought that was kind of interesting at 7,700. And then Joaquin Neiman is another guy, 9,800, who I'm a sucker for, regardless. But I think there's some merit to playing him most weeks. And he has the most wins from the simulator, and he averages about just under 5 strokes gained tee to green on these short courses compared to 3 strokes gained tee to green on longer courses. So another pretty positive split there.
Definitely. And I remember Neiman at the Valspar. I was walking around on Tuesday and caught up with him, and I asked him, I'm like, dude, what are you doing with this putter? He was hitting putts one-handed. He told me it was a drill he was working on to start releasing the header, the putter head. And you can look at his strokes gained stats. And there was a turn about 3 or 4 weeks after the Valspar where all of a sudden his strokes gained numbers turned from a negative to a positive in putting. And that just totally turned his entire season around. It led to his first victory, obviously, a couple of weeks ago over the fall circuit. So, yeah, I think he's firmly in play in a field like this that, he could certainly go out and win. He's one of the best players in the field, no doubt about it. And I like to hear that it seems like a good course fit. So, really good stuff there. Matt, very much appreciated. Anything else before we let you get out of here?
I think that was pretty much it. And again, it's important to note he's only had 4 events at short courses like this over his career so far. So a somewhat small sample, but I think from what we know about him, it makes sense that he would have a good fit here.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's not that he's a short driver of the ball by any stretch. He can certainly pipe it out there, but uses more of a precision style to his advantage there. You don't see him gaining the strokes gained off the tee from his distance that much. So definitely a good statistical fit. So thanks, Matt. Very much appreciate it. We will see you back next week for our last PGA Tour tournament of the year. I don't know, is it the RSM Classic now or?
Oh man, I don't know.
McGladrey Classic? I think it used to be the McGladrey. I know that.
That's a throwback.
Yeah, it is a throwback. So if you aren't following Matt on Twitter at MattJonesTFR, Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure thing, man.